And I'll go right into sharing screen here. So we left off, let me clean this up. We left off with teleporting among scenes. The way we did this was we had an object tagged to be door trigger, whose name was the name of the scene to which we wanted to transition. Before we transition, we caught the name of the current level, the last level, because we're going to use that to find the object that we want to have come out of when we entered the next scene. And so after the transition, we find by name the door that goes back into the level that we just left. We orient our character to face forward outside of the door, a few steps out of it. The other thing was that our characters are don't destroy, unload characters. So we have to have a scene that we start in where our character is in the correct position for its transition to the first scene. Our scenes, each of them, the red scene has doors named blue screen and green scene that it's going to go to. And so as we played this, we were able to transition among the different scenes by walking into the door, at which point we were right in front of the red door that went back into the green door scene. All of this little fizzy stuff around my character, the beams, was part of my wrestling attempt to get this thing to work. And I will remind you that I had to modify the first person player in order to make this work. I want to show you another scene here. This is the factory, and the factory's in this big world. And if you go inside the factory, here you find that there's nothing there. We can't even see the inside of the walls. And this is kind of standard with a lot of assets. We only render the front face of things. So the scene that we're going to transition to is the sewer scene. And it's a similar kind of setup that you get in Unity. It's the room with all of its details and so forth, but there's nothing outside it. And so we're going to transition from our outside world to our sewer scene. And so if I start off here in my opening scene with my teleporting character, and now I'm in the outside world, and I've got this door that leads into the sewer scene, and now I'm inside the sewer. And the sewer actually has some little teleport devices. If I jump in the water, it puts me back up to the top. So in the sewer scene, I've got this other door here that clearly should lead to someplace. And so I've added to this the red, green, and blue scenes. Here's the sewer door that I just came out of, but I can go wander around through all the green, blue, and so forth rooms, as well as the sewer room, and back out to the outside world. So one of my students in a previous version of this class did a very clever trick, and his project was this cave world. And the way he did it was he set up a terrain that had all these ditches in it, and he put a little cap, a little plain cap on the top of this thing, and he rewrote the first person character so that it was upside down. And so now in my opening scene here, I'm going to transition immediately into the outside. I can walk into the sewer. I don't know how to obviate that hiccup of the rendering not being there. But now my cave door here down at the back of the sewer goes into this nice cave. And this is the upside down first person player that Mr. Dunn wrote. And it has an interesting bug that if you touch the walls, you end up walking on the walls and you have to jump to get down off them. But this now has this really nice dark maze-like tunnel that we can wander around in. And I don't want to get lost in here. He actually made that bug a feature that when you got stuck on the ceiling, things happened. Where am I? So I want to go back out and back out to the world. And in the world out here, I've got these other devices, these teleport 2 devices. These are similar to the ones that I wrote for transitioning within the scene, except they don't go to a random one. They go from one to another. So this one now goes to another place here, and this one goes to a further place. So I have these devices for transitioning around in the world. And they're fairly simple devices. These little teleport 2 devices, they're in Sparkle A, B, C, and D. And each one of them has an exposed variable, the game object that they want to go to, and a trigger that then carries the sets your position to be where the other game object is. And I did have to be careful that we manifested outside the other game object, since it's a teleport 2 device that takes me someplace else. So very quickly, I want to address any questions about teleporting among scenes, because this is a very powerful device that can be used to add lots of richness to our games. We have the inside scenes, we have the outside scenes. We can have teleporting to different planets and all kinds of other stuff. Any questions? I'll remind you to type your name in chat if you haven't already. All right, so I want to kind of switch here. Let me quit these things so that they're not soaking up cycles. And I want to talk about COS312, which is the advanced game programming with Unity, which ordinarily I would be plugging that class, but it's not going to be offered next year. But all of the class notes, all of the videos, and all of the sample game folders are available on my Google Drive. So if you go to my Google Drive, which I believe you all have permission to, the notes for the various demos that I did in COS312 are there. So here's Procedural Terrain, there's a video, a PDF, and a game sample. So all of the things, some of which I'm about to show you, are available there in the Google Drive. They're also on Kaltura, and they're also on YouTube. There's a whole list of the videos. Now, the things that I do in advanced game programming include things like network games, games that you can have multiple players, this endless terrain. I'm a big fan of physics, so I did the n-body problem, which was planetary orbits. I used something called the job system for the planetary orbits. And this is a system that takes advantage of the multiple CPU cores that your computers have with threading. We did advanced Nav Mesh, spherical gravity, a space station, Pro Builder, shader graph, visual effect graph, homing missiles, targeted projectile weapons, mirrors, inverse kinetics. There's a graphical programming language called Bolt. I played with a huge star database, all the stars in our local neighborhood, artificial life, cellular automata, waves and procedurally deformed meshes, the Cinemachine Camera system, a procedural chain builder in my crane, the Unity recorder, fog, the Smithsonian 3D model library. They've got models of everything in the world that you can import into Unity, and something called multi-scene physics. I'm going to show you a few of these. And let me start off right away with network world. So where do I want? Shameless plug. So here are two instances of the compiled network game. These are two different versions of the game, in this case running both on my computer. And I'll start one as the host. And so here's my little character standing around in the world. And over here, I'm going to start this one as the client. And so now we can see each other. I can see the green one in the left scene, and I can see the white one, and I can shoot bullets at each other. And if I, of course, hit the other player, it kills them, and they then respawn someplace else. So network games, they're really hard. They're a lot harder than doing single-person games, but of course, they have the added reward of you can then play them over the internet with many other players. The advanced Nav Mesh, some of you actually did advanced Nav Mesh for your advanced training, but there are things like point and click games where we can point and click and the little character goes to the spot that I've clicked to. Here's one where it's just throwing kind of random positions within the world and tracking to them. I have a very hard to navigate area here that it'll avoid. Here's the same scene with a whole bunch of agents out chasing these random spots that are placed in the world. And once they get to them, it throws another random spot and they go someplace else. And here's a setup of a waypoint system. This is a little character that's going sequentially around a series of waypoints, and it calculates the shortest path, taking into account how hard it is to get across that little gap there. You'll notice here, I believe now that the door is open, it's going to assume that it can make a path. No, it didn't. Never mind. But anyway, that door opens and shuts, and it does various things. The powerful thing about this new system is that it allows you to generate nav meshes on the fly. With the basic system, you have to bake it ahead of time. So you have to have the whole scene set up ahead of time. And what this means is we can't do like procedural worlds like this maze system, which is generating a maze. And so we wouldn't have the nav mesh for it since we're making the world as we go. And in this case, the nav mesh is baked at runtime. And this is something you can only do with, where is it, L. So with that example, I can do things like set up my character to be a Nav Mesh agent, but not have the Nav Mesh control it, but let the Nav Mesh calculate the path for me so that I have this kind of hint thing that leads me through the world. If I disobey it, it continues to make this path back to where I was. What is it? LM there. So I did this not just with a path, but I put these series of particle effects out along the path so that I have to follow the particle systems that lead me through the maze. What is it? LM. And there are also lights that you can follow or follow the path. And of course, just to demonstrate here, this one lets you click to make the path. And so you can actually see how quickly it is able to recalculate the path that it needs to traverse in order to get to the particular place. I believe some of you, I also had a lot of fun with crowds, which is where one has lots and lots of agents. This one may be a little laggy, but it behaves better in when you're not zooming. But with these crowds, these guys are competing armies. They have little raycasts that point out the front of them, and when they see an adversary, there's a certain probability of them shooting it. And so these armies go back and forth and destroy each other as they go. And of course, what is it? We can have these little Nav Mesh characters navigating a world where they're opening and closing gates that let them through, and they have to recalculate the path as they go. And so as the gate closes, they have to figure out a different way around it. The little armies here have different strategies. The red army is kind of an army on the march. They're following the waypoints, whereas the blue army, these are hunters who target a specific adversary and hunt them down. And so you have kind of this guerrilla warfare tactics where the little blues are attacking the moving red army. And there are various other instances of this that I'll let you play with. As I said, these are all on the Google Drive for you to play with if you want to. I think some of you did this 3D Nav Mesh example as your advanced training, but with the high test system, the Nav Meshes don't have to be just horizontal surfaces. Our little character can jump from one Nav Mesh to another on an off mesh link, and it can go to different spots in my three-dimensional world. And it treats this just as if it were a continuous Nav Mesh that the thing was traveling along and going to the different places that we've defined with our point and click little thing. And so our character traverses these different Nav Meshes and follows its way around. And this is definitely a fun one. So I had a lot of fun with homing missiles. This one was actually a tool that I got from the asset store. And I kind of extracted the basics of it, simplified it some, and of course rewrote it for my own behavior. But these are little projectile rockets that have a thrust that is firing out the rear, and they steer themselves towards their targets. So the target can actually move, and they will adjust their trajectories to track this target. So these things are all tracking this little target that I'm moving around in the world. They can only turn at a certain rate, so it takes them a while to get there. But ultimately, they destroy this target, and once it's gone, they all just kind of fall out of the sky. So, of course, we can put this in a world with one of our characters here, and the missile system there is shooting it at the little car that is, of course, trying to evade them as it runs around in the world. Here's an airplane that's following a waypoint system, and it's going to be targeted by the missile system, and at some point, one of them is going to hit it. This is one of the AI airplanes that follows a waypoint circuit. There it's hit. And I spent a lot of time arranging for this crash sequence that the airplane goes through as it falls. There are various dogfights here. Here's a dogfight AI, one that is following the other airplane, and the other airplane is following a waypoint circuit. And so the one with the red trail is going to get on the tail of the one with the orange trail. And occasionally it's going to fire missiles that will shoot out and eventually kill the other player. And there's also a version where you get to fight the player, the dog fighter, and I found it to be really, really hard to, the dogfight AI just gets behind you and it's impossible to shake it off. So I had a lot of fun with endless missile, or with the playing missiles. Procedural terrain is one where we make a terrain procedurally, that is with a program. And the endless terrain, what this does is it builds tiles. It has these sort of 50 by 50 tiles that it builds out ahead of you. So as my player moves across the world, it builds terrain out in front of it. And this is kind of expensive. So you can see some hiccups here as it's going on. One of the tricks that we do here, now what is it? Every program has a different menu. What we do with this is put some fog in the world so that I can't see those ones that are being built out ahead. Here in this little example, I've got those homing missiles, and the object of the game is to penetrate the enemy's defense here, this top ball. And the missiles are, of course, coming out and going to shoot me down if I'm not careful. So, and there are different examples here. There are different kinds of landscapes that you can make, the valley landscape or an ocean landscape that has kind of islands. So that's procedural terrain. Inverse kinetics is a technique for finding the arrangement of angles that make a set of links go to a specific point. So instead of setting the angles and figuring out where the tip is going to be, we put the tip someplace and we figure out what the angles have to be in order to make a structure that points to that particular place. And so I can take control of this and move this thing around with the arrow keys. And as I move it around, the structure has to adapt its set of angles in order to make this. And of course, I got tired of making them by hand, so I have different generators that generate these links. And I actually got kind of carried away with it with generators of generators. So there's something that generates the links, and then there's something that generates arrays of links. And so I have all these crazy things that who knows what they're for, but they're kind of fun. And I actually found that I could make a sort of spider character here. My spider can wiggle its body up and down, but I've adjusted the feet, the bases of these links to kind of follow along so my spider can walk across the landscape. And of course, there are other things. There's weird transparent spheres that do different things. I have no idea what you use this for. It might be kind of a cool boss in some kind of scene, but this is all done with inverse kinetics, and I had a lot of fun with that. I think I've mentioned the Cinemachine Camera before, and the Cinemachine Camera, it's a package that you get from the package manager. But what it does is it takes command of the single actual camera and controls it with a virtual camera. And so I have my little player here with, whoops, what did I do? I have this little player here with a kind of orbit camera. When the mouse is low, it's in close. When the mouse is high, it's up high. And as my player runs here, when I do the jump, it switches to a camera that's on the side. And when I do the slide, it switches to the other side. So I have all these different virtual cameras that the Cinemachine system is controlling the which one is in command. One of the tools it has is a dolly cam. So in this case, the camera is constrained to move on a track, sort of like a waypoint track. And so my little player, which is the green dot, is being tracked by this camera that's on the blue dot. And the camera on the blue dot is going to move on the track to the point that is closest to the character. And so you have kind of interesting behavior here. It's not, the camera's not tracking scrupulously. It's kind of following this circuit around, and it's going to get as close to the player as it can and stay on its track. Here's another example of blending between two different cameras. I have this free look camera that lets me orbit around my character and move up and down to be closer. But when I start moving, it switches to the dolly cam. And so it's now tracking me from this distant camera that is constrained to run on a track. And when I go back to the animation that's standing still, it moves back over some time to that free look camera that lets me orbit around and move up and down. And all of this is done with the Cinemachine system, and it's extremely slick. There's another camera that picks the best view. So there's like 6 or 8 different cameras in here, and they're looking for the best view. And so if I run my player in behind one of these barriers, it switches to a camera that can see the player. And just for fun, I've put a gun on the camera so that the camera has a gun that's just firing bullets at my player. And of course, this could be used for something other than cameras. If I didn't have a camera on this, you would have a gun that automatically tracks your player, which is kind of what I've done in here. The little view in the lower left corner is what the cameras are seeing. And as I enter through this yellow trigger, it switches to a camera over on the side that is shooting at me. And so as I run through here, each of the different cameras that have the best view are switched to the player to target the player, and the gun that is on the different cameras just targets my player and shoots at him. So that's kind of cool. So that's barely touches what you can do with the Cinemachine system, but there are a lot of different things. Back when we were playing with physics, we made a little chain of objects connected with joints. And I, of course, used this with my wrecking ball crane. That's that little dangly chain that's connecting the ball is a procedural chain that is generated procedurally. And I can do things like change the length of my chain. So if I do the Q here, the chain gets longer. And if I do the E, the chain gets shorter, and I can move this thing around. And I have this ball on a chain. I use in addition to that one that I just showed you, with the first version of the crane, once I'd done the IK stuff, I could then make a wrecking ball object or a crane that had, there, okay, I knocked one down. So I had a lot of fun with this one, and there are a bunch of different examples, which of course you can play with. The end body problem, was the end body? The end body problem, this is orbits, and this is the one that demonstrates the job system. And so here I am running without the job system. I have, I think, 400 particles in here. And you can see my frame rate's terrible. And so if I add the job system, and this is now using the multiple CPUs on my computer. And so with the same number of particles, it went from a handful of frames per second to 150. And there's actually this thing called the burst system, which makes the job system even faster. And so now with 400 particles, I'm up in the 200s, and I can actually go to 1,000, and I'm still over 100, 2,000, and I'm in the 40s, 3,000, and now it's starting to lag down. We're playing with Zoom at the same time here, so I'm not going to bother going to 400. I also do collisions here, so these end body problems can collide, and so as these things collide, they coalesce into a bigger object, and their colors kind of combine, and we end up with a handful of bigger objects, and all of this stuff floating around, doing the end body problem. Each particle is calculating the force on it due to every other particle, so it's an n squared kind of thing. And this is the job system, which is really, really cool. I had a lot of fun with spherical gravity. And so this one is a situation where we're walking around on a ball. And so my player is standing on this sphere, and whoops, I ran too fast and I actually launched. You can see my little character is now sort of in orbit. There, I landed again. But I can walk around on this ball and push these little objects around and jump, and I'll eventually fall back down to my my planet. So this, in this case, what I had to do was, of course, rewrite the controller for my character so that it's oriented appropriately. and rewrite the whole gravity system so that it was spherically attracted to, I can never remember that, quit. So I realized that I could jump from one planet to another. So I've now got two attractors in here, and I'm jumping from one planet to another. And of course, having too much time on my hands, I threw lots of planets in here. And this is an automatic jumper who lands and jumps immediately. And so it's traveling among the different planets, jumping as it goes. And there are also all those different little objects in the world that that fall down to the different planets. Here's a scene with kind of complete chaos with a whole lot of objects and a whole lot of jumpers that are jumping around in the world. So so that was spherical gravity. This is by a guy named Sebastian Legueux, I think. So I wanted to make a space station. I wanted to make a toroidal world that that we could walk around in. And so I have this toroid, or this torus, this donut-shaped object, which I made in ProBuilder, which is, of course, one of the lectures that we do in the advanced class. There's a whole lecture on the ProBuilder, but I made this torus, turned it inside out, and I have a bunch of different toruses, including this open one that I can kind of jump in. The ones with the roof I can't jump in, but my little character walks around in here. And this was done with the spherical gravity system and a minus sign. I just changed, instead of sucking in, it pushes out, and I put the repeller here in the center of this ring. And now I have this space station that I can walk around in and have this artificial gravity. So that's all pretty cool. And the last thing I'll show you here is the projectile-based weapon. With the lasers that you guys, a lot of you did, you had this gun that you could shoot directly at an object. You had this little targeting reticule and you could shoot. But with projectile weapons, you don't know where the projectile is going to land. And so it's a little harder to target it. But I put this target out here, and my projectile weapon hits that specific target. So I can target very specific objects here and blow things down with my little targeting gun. If there's nothing in the world, it just fires them at the particular angle and they skyburst. But I can target specific points here with my gun. I put this on a little character called the Archer, and the Archer is a little character with a bow and arrow. And I did a lot of stuff with the Cinemachine camera here. So when I target, it switches to a kind of zoom view, and then it pulls back and it fires the arrow. There was a lot of stuff done with Mechanim to coordinate the firing of the arrow with when this player releases the bow. So a lot of fiddling in here to get things to work right. And I've got this big tower over here that is some kind of tunnel system that my character might want to explore. And I found that with this over-the-shoulder camera, I had a lot of trouble in the canyons. And so there's a toggle that lets you shift to a directly behind camera, that lets you navigate better down these different hallways. With it over the shoulder, it kind of puts it off to the side and you can't see anything. With it placed right behind you, then you can. And there's a bomb that blows up this entire thing that makes it a lot harder to navigate in here. So a lot of fun in here with the Archer, the projectile weapons, the Cinemachine, and the Mechanim animation system that the bombs are going off automatically here in the menu scene just to keep one amused. So I encourage you to have a look at these, as I said, on the Google Drive. On the Google Drive are all of these different lessons with the class notes and the videos and the game folders, importantly, for you to try out if you want to. If you have questions, any of these things that you are exploring and you can't figure out how it works, write me email anytime, and I'm happy to discuss it with you. So I'm going to stop sharing at this point and entertain any questions about the not to be offered next semester 412 class.
I do have a question.
Yes.
I noticed, just to clarify, there's not a final exam, right? Like, there's no like,
No, there's no final exam. There is a
okay,
final exam time slot. And one of the reasons for having a final exam is because that then sets the time at which I have to have the grades in. The grades have to be in, I forget what it is, a week after the final exam. And if I don't have a final exam, they have to be in a week after the last day of classes. So this gives me more time to grade.
okay,
And so the due date for the final project is the time slot of the final exam, which I think is Wednesday at 8 to 10 a.m. or something like that. And I'm usually pretty forgiving about the time stamp. I really mainly look at the date, not at the hour. And so basically we have to have them in on that day. And I remind you that there's an assessment, not an assessment, but an assessment of the environmental and game mechanics that you've used in your game. Don't forget that document. It's part of the grade. And there's also a document that is the instructions telling me how to play your game, so I don't have to figure it out by reading scripts and stuff like that. Okay. So, yeah. Any other questions?
thank you.
I've had a real blast with this class. I looked back in my class records in my old grade sheets because this is the 10th time that I've taught this class. And over that time, I've had 571 students, including you guys. And we started off with Unity 3 and Unity 4, and then Unity 5, and then Unity 2.17 was Unity 6, and Unity 2.18, and Unity 2.19, and Unity 2.20, and now there's 2.21 that has an LTS, I think, a long-term support. But there's a beta of Unity 2022 out there and every major upgrade has new and improved and glitzier tools and requires a stronger and stronger computer to run them. Unity 3 ran very happily on an old MacBook laptop, and Unity 2020 just barely runs on my new MacBook Pro. So, it's the way things go. Everything gets bigger and requires stronger and stronger computers. Any other questions? Anything else? I'm going to,
yeah,
go ahead.
I had a question. Do you have any intention of teaching 412 maybe in the following spring?
I'm retiring this spring, so I'm no longer going to be on payroll at the university. No, there's the possibility that the director of the School of Computing and Information Science, in response to a public outcry, will say, maybe we should hire Fastook to come back and teach 312 or 412 for money. And if that happened, I'd certainly consider it. But really, the material's all there. I taught 412 as a remote class in 2021. All of the lectures are recorded. All of the game folders are there. All of the class notes are there. So you can really do 412 on your own with me to consult. You won't get 3 credits for it, but it won't cost you $1,800. So, pluses and minuses. Yeah, no, and I'd be happy to continue to consult. I would be happy to set up Zoom sessions with anybody who had like unsolvable questions that the class video, class notes, and game folder didn't solve for you. So, okay. Anything else? I'm going to stop recording here.